Good morning, welcome, 1,000 welcomes, 1,000 beepings with joy. And we are meditating today on a fantastic subject, the substance of peace. And so the substance of peace is a phrase that comes from Swami Nityananda and from his amazing translation of the Bhagavad Gita. So this is a reminder, this teaching, that within each of us is always present the substance of peace. And the teaching that we began meditating on from the Buddha is also offering a very similar truth. I shared the easy part from the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha says there is the steadiness of earth beneath our feet always. There is the calm, clear, vast awareness of the heavens above us always. The Buddha says, our task, if we are students of awakeness, if we are students of truth and aliveness and the light, is to be that steady peace and to be that calm, vast, clear awareness, even if people are hurling insults at us, even if we face physical violence, even if someone is sawing your arms and your legs off. He says, if you are a student of truth, do not depart from the steadiness of the earth beneath you, even if someone is sawing your legs and your arms off. Do not depart from the calm, clear, vast sky of awareness above you. Do not engage in ill will, even for one breath, even for one moment, even for one heartbeat. So that's our invitation, is to be the substance of peace always, in the midst of all duality, in the midst, bless you, of all pain, all sorrow, all fear, all confusion, all upset, always. How may I be the substance of peace? I came across a remarkable true story. So you all have probably noticed, I do my best to come up with a contemporary, lived, vivid, daily example of these eternal teachings. And so my heart just melted when I came across this interview this week. So March 28th, there's this interview, this town hall of young people. This woman was being interviewed. So she just graduated from university 2 years ago. She's very, very young. When she was 15, she was going to school. She lived in a country where it was not safe to advocate that girls be educated. She advocated that girls be educated. So she was on the school bus one day coming back from school, and these gunmen stopped the bus, and they got on board the bus, and they said, "Which one of you is this girl?" And her friends didn't say, "Oh, that's her," but their eyes looked toward her, and that was enough so that the gunmen shot her, and they actually shot 2 other people who were on the school bus, 2 other schoolgirls as well. So the next thing she knew, she was in a coma, so she lost conscious awareness. She was transported to another country. She woke up out of her coma. And then she got to decide, how do I respond to what happened to me? And what she said is this. She said, fear and hopelessness died. Strength and courage were born. And so she has gone on with that. She faced death, and she met the death of separateness. She met the death of the separate individual self, and she lived beyond the ending of separateness. And that was her comment. Age 15, fear and hopelessness, that was what died. Strength and courage, that was what was born. Okay, so fast forward, we're last Monday, I think that was March 28th, last Monday. She's being interviewed, and the interviewer says to her, very tenderly and tentatively, "Would you ever consider speaking to the gunman who shot you?" And she says, "Oh yeah, I did that." It's like not a big deal, like that comes across so clearly in her responses. It's just not a big deal. And the interviewer says very tentatively, would you ever consider forgiving them? And she says, oh yeah, I did that. She said that she spoke to them. This was years ago, and she's commenting on what had happened previously years ago. She spoke to them in a courtroom setting, and they apologized to her. And she said the only thing she could possibly feel was sympathy and empathy and awareness of how young they were, and that they were acting out of ignorance. They were acting out of misunderstanding. They didn't know her. They didn't have anything against her. And so she was able to be in contact with what the yogic teachings call the light within the others, independent of their misdeeds. It's not that she was saying, yay, please go out and shoot more people, not in the least, but she was able to connect with the sacredness, the wholeness, the light within them that was beyond their actions. And so each of us is invited to do this. Each of us is invited to connect with the sacredness, the wholeness, the light within ourselves that is beyond our good deeds, and that is also beyond our bungling deeds. And there's no human who's free of both. So the more that we have good humor and patience and awareness of that for ourselves, the more we're able to extend it to others. So a couple more comments that she made. She said, if I hated, that would just create more hate. That would just create more violence. That would not be part of the solution. And so she said, my revenge is I educate girls. So she works to educate and work against the forces of ignorance and the forces of darkness and the forces of fear. And so for each of us, that for her was her particular crucible. And so a crucible is an area of intense heat or intense pressure or intense trial. It can be like a combination of different elements, and something new is born out of that crucible. That was her crucible. So for us, it's different. And so for each of us, I'm asking us to be in contact with what is my crucible. Collectively, we might, as a planet, be going through a bit of a crucible right now. And so the question is always to ask, what would I love to create from this? And so Jung said the same thing. And these teachings just sort of knock you off their feet with their power, but also their simplicity. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. So for every single one of us, whatever that pain point is, whatever that crisis is, whatever that fear, that trauma, that outrage, that offense to the basic innocence and goodness of each of us, there's not a human on the planet who has not faced that. And our only question is, what would I like to create? How would I like to respond to this? How would I like to respond in ways that create healing, in ways that create understanding, in ways that create compassion, in ways that create freedom, in ways that create forgiveness? So we've been meditating on teachings of Howard Thurman and Olive Schreiner. One of Howard Thurman's most famous sayings, and he offered this in many different phrasings and many different contexts, one of his most famous sayings was, life has placed a crown above my head so high that I will spend the rest of my life trying to grow tall enough to wear that crown. And it's a saying that he got from Olive Schreiner. So the way that she presents it, love places a crown above our heads so high that we spend the rest of our lives trying to grow tall enough to wear that crown. And so for each of us, this is the possibility, that which we can grow into, that is beyond human deeds and human misdeeds, that is beyond pain, that is beyond anything we've ever experienced in the realm of time and space. And so one of the ways to feel your way into this is to remember the story about the woman who is caught in adultery. And Jesus is sort of challenged by those who are in authority because the law says she's supposed to be stoned to death. That's what the law says. And so the people who are in authority look at Jesus and they're like, oh yeah? What are you going to do now? The law law says. Stone her to death. And what he does is he opens up into an entirely new law, into an awareness of the laws of energy that undergird and guide and support all of us. And he says, and I'm asking all of us right now, raise your hand if you've never missed the mark of perfection. There's one joking hand raised. So he says, that one, you can throw the first stone. If you've never missed the mark of perfection, you can throw the first stone. And what Howard Thurman comments about that teaching from Jesus is this. He believes that woman into fulfilling her possibilities. That's the crown above her head. So that's what we do for one another. That's what Swami Shankarananda did in founding a meditation community. A crown is placed above our head so high that we spend the rest of our lives growing into wearing that crown. And that is what that teaching tells us, that this is possible, to look past the deeds and the misdeeds and to be in contact with the sacredness, the unchanging ground, that which is not woundable within every human. And so Jesus reaches out to that core, that ground, and believes her into fulfilling her possibility. And so he says, go, don't keep doing it, right? So he's believing that she's capable of newness. He's believing that she's capable of freshness. And he's also believing that all of the people who want to throw stones are capable of newness. They're capable of freshness. He's believing in the fulfillment of their possibility as well. And so a couple of teachings here. This is, again, one of those really wonderful teachings from Jesus that invites us to shift our perspective. This is from Luke, and it's chapter 18, verses 9 through 14. Speaking to all of us, and keep in mind, we're all the characters in the parables. We're all the characters. They're all within us. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, one who has missed the mark of perfection. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And so there is a vision here that this teaching is inviting each of us to cultivate. And it's exemplified perfectly by that young person who was able to look past the misdeeds of the gunman and to say, of course I forgive you. The only thing that is possible for me to feel in relation to you is sympathy and empathy. Of course I forgive you. And then notice what happens. As soon as she says that, she is free. She's free. Anything short of that, and she would have actually still been tied in consciousness to the gunman. She would have been walking through her life bonded to them. And you can kind of feel what that feels like, to walk forward in freedom or to be sort of still stumbling and feel sticky in relation to whatever the sources of pain were within our lives. This vision right here is giving us an invitation to not present ourselves to the divine in a self-congratulatory way or in a way that compares ourselves to anyone else, but to simply present ourselves to the divine in honesty and in courage, in spiritual humility and in openness, saying something like, I open totally to divine grace. I open totally to divine light. I ask the light to penetrate every level and layer of my body and my being. I ask the light to show me, how does the divine see me and all? And if we are able to see in that way, we will see all of the events of our lives in a different light, in a new light, in a light that is able to free, is able to heal, is able to forgive, is able to let go. This is a basic invitation that mystics of all different traditions give us. And so a mystic is just one who encounters the divine directly. If you meditate, you're basically a mystic, because you're encountering the divine directly within yourself. So this is remembering, this is just remembering, oh, the divine is right here. The divine loves me. Prior to my emerging into form, I am loved. I'm already loved. I'm already cared for. I'm supported all along through all of the events of my lifetime. And so there is a teaching from Meister Eckhart, which says that prior to the arising of differentiation, the soul and God are one. And so I'm inviting us to actually feel that. If you can, prior to the arising of the Om, there is silence. And see if you can just invite yourself to feel what it feels like before the Om arises. If you were going to articulate Om, it's the silence before the Om arises. That is the non-manifest. That is the invisible. That is what Meister Eckhart terms the ground. The ground is also groundless. It's not a thing. But in the ground, the soul and God are one prior to the arising of differentiation. And that same ground is present within every human. And it is unwoundable. There is that in me, that in you, that in every human that cannot ever be wounded, that cannot ever depart from this sacredness, that cannot ever depart from this oneness prior to the arising of differentiation. Our only task, this is it, is to let go of anything that blocks our awareness of the ground in the other. Only that. So any attitude, any behavior, any belief, any concept, any judgment that blocks our awareness of the ground, the total, fresh, precious, sacred, amazing gorgeousness of the other. All we have to do is let go of that. It's already here. So the divinity, the grace, the dignity, the bliss, the gladness, whatever be your word for it, the wholeness, the aliveness, the glory, the mercy, it's already here. Our only task is to purify our minds, because our minds block our awareness of this. Our concepts block our felt awareness of this. So don't blame yourself if you notice, oh, I'm not living fully in conscious bliss. Just remind yourself. Swami Shankarananda says, remind yourself, I'm learning. I'm learning. I'm learning to live in conscious bliss all the time. I'm learning to let go of my attitudes that block my awareness of the ground within the other. That's the teaching of Jesus right there. That's what the Pharisee is doing. He's got all these attitudes that block his awareness of the sacredness of the other. And what Jesus says is, when we have attitudes that block our awareness of the ground within the other, we're distant from the divine. Our own judgments, our own concepts, our own attitudes, our own behaviors, our own beliefs, our own mind that makes us afraid of the other, that makes us hopeless, that distances us from the divine, and it's all in our own mind. And so we're just invited to clarify the mind. That's our practice. And so within ourselves, we likely already have this awareness, but wherever I have been feeling frustration, wherever I have been feeling doubt, Wherever I have been feeling fear, wherever I have been feeling sadness, wherever I have been feeling itchy, whatever it is that I've been feeling that feels not like complete bliss in human form, that's my practice. And so to just look upon that with clarity and calm and gratitude and just be aware, that's my practice for right now. And to trust the process. To trust the process that every single time, by thought, by word, by deed, every single time we say, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. I am not the pain I experienced, I am the forgiveness that I extend. Often the forgiveness that we extend is to ourselves for having experienced that pain. And when we can forgive ourselves for having experienced that pain, the forgiveness of the other naturally arises. It just becomes like an ocean, a universe of mercy, a universe of freedom and of grace and of gladness. And so for ourselves, why don't we just close our eyes? And if you like, you can place your hands in prayer at the heart. This can bring you into balance inwardly. And just set an intention. Make it a powerful intention. I vow to let go of any attitude, any behavior, any belief that blocks my direct, felt awareness of the ground, the core, the light, the sacredness in other human beings. And notice what happens. I give myself permission also to be continually in contact with the ground, the core, the light, the sacredness of my being. I give myself permission to live in forgiveness, to live in joy and peace and freedom. I give myself permission to step forward joyfully and confidently, creating a future I love, in which not only I and the ones who may have considered themselves my enemy may live in peace and harmony and concord, but also to live in a land where all the children of all the humans will recognize you too are my sister. You too are my brother. You too are my kin. You too are my sibling. You too are my own self. By grace, it is so. Thank God, and God bless us all.